Well, it's wonderful to be here. It's my first trip to the Art of Living Center. I've taken the courses of Sri Sri Ravi Shankarji in the US, in Canada, but always every time I've tried to visit, something else has come up. So I'm very, very glad I finally got to be here. And I want to definitely come back for a much longer stay. I'll probably do that later this year. It's quite a place. I didn't expect this is such an amazing place. Very wonderful energy and good people here. So just to tell you a little bit about myself, until about 20 some years ago, I was a typical person chasing the professional success and business success and material success. Trained as a physicist first in Delhi. Went to the US to do my doctorate in physics, but switched to computer science, and had a philosophical interest throughout my life. In childhood, a lot of Vedanta courses with Swami Chinmayanand and Ramakrishna Mission and so on. And then learned TM from Maharishi, and then moved on to many other meditation experiences, Tantra experiences. And then I entered the business world in the US and in the IT field, software, telecommunications, became a management consultant for big telecom people. AT&T was my big client. And then I started my own ventures. And I always had a goal that I should quit when I feel I can be financially self-sufficient without having to work a job, because I'd rather pursue my meditation and my philosophical interests. That was my quest from a young age. But somehow or other, every time it seemed like it wasn't enough, I wanted to chase something bigger, which is the kind of rat race you can get into. And then in 94, about that time, starting earlier but culminating in 94, I suddenly started having a whole lot of awakening experiences. And I was also with a guru who is no longer in the body. Sri Sriji knows my guru, no longer in the body, very profound guru, very much in the Raman Maharshi tradition. And then this guru interpreted what I was going through. And very suddenly, I decided to drop everything. So much so that most of my people didn't believe it. They thought I was maybe it was just a trick, or maybe I was dreaming up a new venture, didn't want people to know what it is. And so I was running away just to dream up something new. Some people thought I was going through a midlife crisis. Yeah? Some of my friends, one of my friends said he knows a very good psychiatrist. And he was very serious. He said, some men go through that, and you should get some help and all that. So anyway, I never looked back, and it's been over 20 years. I arranged my life so that I could not need to make money, have a job, pursue any careers, posts, ambitions like that, and spent a lot of time in meditation and a lot of time reading, learning. And then suddenly I was drawn into becoming more public. For many years it was entirely a private pursuit. And I became public through a series of almost accidental events, which I won't go through, we don't have time for that. And then one thing led to another. I realized that the education system in the US did not do justice to our tradition. The media did not do justice to our tradition. Various think tanks and various intellectuals didn't do justice to our tradition. It was characterized as what I call the caste, cows and curry. Caste, cows, curry, dowry, sati kind of tradition. And yet, I could witness that thousands of Americans were going into yoga and meditation and vegetarianism and eco-friendliness, environmentalism, animal protection, the kind of things that actually were influenced by our tradition. And yet I couldn't get the two reconciled. And it seemed first I found that the people in religious studies were basically pursuing the caste, cows and curry anthropology, and they were not really looking at the philosophical dimension, so I became concerned about that. And when I would point out that why is it that when you teach the religious traditions of India, you don't teach all these positive things which the West is getting, how can you be trashing the source while enjoying the fruits of the same source? And I started noticing that that's happening. So then they said, you got to go to a different department. The people you're referring to are not in religious studies or philosophy, they are in psychology, and things like that. And then I found when I went to the psychology department, sure enough, they were digesting a whole lot of Indian traditions into Western frameworks without acknowledging the source. And when I would point out that this is not quite authentic, I would get all kinds of excuses, including statements like, we're doing you a favor because we're making your tradition more famous. It'll become more famous if we don't tell him that it's from India, if we tell him it's from Western science, that sort of a thing. And it reminded me of King George V, I think, when he was asked, why are you wearing the Kohinoor from India on your crown? He's reported to have said that the people of the empire should be very proud that I have chosen their diamond to be worn on my crown. So a sort of arrogance I found among the Western people who were appropriating, as if they're doing us a favor because we're no good, and once it is theirs, it'll have more credibility. So I started tracking all this. One, Stephen LaBerge in Stanford had a patent or something on lucid dreaming, which is yoga nidra. And he set up these institutes all over the world. I met these lucid dreaming people in some conferences telling me amazing research and how it was doing all these things. Later, the US Army started training soldiers with lucid dreaming who were coming back from combat because it would de-traumatize. To de-traumatize people who were all cognitively shaken up, out of all the techniques they could find, they picked lucid dreaming, but there was not a single mention of its source. And again, after his talks, I would go to ask him these questions, and then he would tell me, I learned it in Rishikesh, I am very fond, my guru, I did this and I did that, I spent 20 years. So I said, why are you telling me this privately, why don't you say it in the hall? And he would say, oh, no, I'll lose all my science grants, because then they'll think this is some kind of a religion and they will not take it seriously as science. It has to be Western, it has to be Western science to be credible. But if it's linked to all those sources, they'll never believe it. So that's the kind of game that was going on. And then John Kabat-Zinn, who trademarked mindfulness meditation, same thing. Mindfulness meditation has become a big industry. But it is Vipassana. It is Vipassana, Goenka. He learnt it from Goenka. And then, closer to your tradition, transcendental meditation is what Herb Benson in Harvard called the relaxation response. That's his patented term. He's now in his 90s. He started in the 70s learning TM, finding that it brought physiological changes. He's a doctor at Harvard, big shot. And so he started doing research on TM meditators and found all these changes. But when he would publish the papers in his own name, he wouldn't say they're doing TM, he would say that they're doing relaxation response. And then if you read the relaxation response, the steps, you have to first do this, then you do that, the procedure, and you lay it next to TM, it's exactly the same thing. But luckily, in my research, I found all the smoking guns, because in his early years, he published some papers jointly with some TM people acknowledging what he was doing, but quickly he realized that it's really smart not to acknowledge this anymore, so he dropped acknowledging them. So this whole business of appropriation went on. And recently because in his 90s, his private diaries, writings, things like that, his archive, he turned over to the Harvard Library, and they're going to make a special research archive. I found out about this, and I wanted to have access because I think sometimes people in their private diaries write a lot of notes which they don't want to admit. So it was only accessible with special permission, and I knew that if I use my name, they'll never give it to me because they know what I'm doing. You know, I sent somebody else. He's a young neuroscience PhD student in Duke University, so he's volunteering for me, and wants to be kept anonymous. So he went, got permission to look at these 25 boxes, and he took him. They need to make a scan. They have to authorize to make a scan. But this guy was a smart fellow. He took an iPhone with him, and before I knew it, my email box was flooded with emails from him. And he spent 2-3 days just going on clicking. So he sent me a lot of very interesting stuff not known in the public, such as Herb Benson corresponded with Duke Edinburgh, Prince Philip's, Queen Elizabeth's husband, way back in the 70s, saying that there are certain discoveries he's made from the ancient Himalayan mystics that will change the course of Western civilization, but have to be brought out properly, asking for support and so on. And the National Institute of Mental Health in the US, the National Institute of Health in the US, all kinds of things. So the interesting thing is, these people who appropriate use the Indian source for credibility with other Westerners, because at that time they don't have credibility. They use this is something special from India as their legitimizing quality. And yet, when they are producing the results for the general public, they want to call it their own. So I could go on and give you a very large number. I'm writing actually a whole book on Indian appropriations into modern neuroscience and cognitive sciences. And there is one volume from Buddhism, one volume from Hindu traditions. And there's so much from Tantra, from Advaita, from Patanjali, all kinds of things that I'm talking about the scientific kind of traditions. And so I coined the term digestion to refer to how food gets digested and the body takes what's useful and rejects what doesn't seem to fit, and then the food has disappeared. So of course when a predator like a tiger is going to eat up a goat, he's very happy with the goat, otherwise he wouldn't find it delicious. But he may even praise the goat. He may say, wow, you're so wonderful. But the idea is ultimately he wants to take in whatever is useful and make it his own. So the goat DNA gets disassembled, broken down into smaller and smaller parts. And these small parts are then reassembled into the tiger's DNA. And it all goes into the tiger's body as tiger DNA. And there is no more goat left. It would be a foolish goat who thinks that this is good for me because the tiger is so powerful, he can run faster, I'll be sitting in his belly and getting a joyride. The point is that, and a lot of our people feel that if our tradition gets appropriated, digested, it's good for us because it'll spread faster. They haven't understood digestion properly, because once digested, it is no longer your tradition. It is also distorted. And a huge amount of what we call the West has been digested from Africans, Native Americans, pre-Christian pagans, a whole lot from India very early on, including what is being done now, and so on. So this digestion engine has become very efficient in doing its job, and the civilizations that end up getting digested disappear. They're no longer needed. They are kind of, you can put them in a museum, they're quaint, exotic, part of sort of natural history, but they're not living traditions anymore. So since I want ours to be a living tradition, it's important for me to kind of problematize this, bring this out, make people concerned about it. So there's a large amount of contributions that India has made to the world, and I'm writing constantly a whole lot of books on this. The basis of this is a philosophy from the Vedas, which gives us a kind of an adhyatmic inner pursuit and inner science. It also gives us flexibility because we kept the Shrutis and Smritis separate. unlike many other traditions where they combine the two, so they're fixed, they're frozen, they can't change. In our case, the Shrutis are eternal, but the Smritis have to be rewritten, recontextualized for every age. So keeping the Smritis separate means we can keep changing, and yet the Shrutis are the same, so the overall paradigm, the overall foundation stays the same, but keeps adapting to new circumstances. And this has given us, you think of Shruti and Smriti as two banks of a river, so it keeps flowing with these two banks. This is quite different than in the Abrahamic religions where there is no separation of Shruti, Smriti, it's sort of combined as one book, and that book is frozen and final and so on. If you look at the contributions these inner sciences have made in fields like creativity, in fields like just general creativity, art, mathematics, physical sciences, it's just volumes and volumes. And my foundation has started a 20-volume project on the history of Indian science and technology. We've done 9 volumes already. We're going on doing more. We've already done numerous conferences, world conferences. We've already done numerous world conferences on Indian contributions to science, to psychology, cognitive science, neuroscience. We've probably published 5 or 6 or 7 big conference proceedings, lots of them, and many more are on their way. So obviously this is a tradition that has played an important role in the world, and rather than digesting it and throwing it into a museum, it needs to survive and thrive and continue, prospering and even spreading. So I'm extremely happy when I meet groups like this, because all of you are doing what I think is the right thing, right passion. And I'm extremely happy at what Sri Ravi Shankar ji is doing, because he's a foremost leader trying to making sure it gets revived. Yeah? I also study what is non-digestible into the West. Okay, what is non-digestible? And why is it non-digestible? Because certain things don't fit the paradigm. So it would kind of give them indigestion. It would violate. Since I talked about Sri Ravi Shankar, guru, great guru, the idea of a guru is non-digestible. It's a very interesting point. Why? See, Westerners have a very hard time that this is a human being and he's my access to the divine. It's kind of like a Wi-Fi hotspot. Guru is a hotspot for access. Okay, now their idea is that God is infinitely removed. In Judaism, there is no human divine presence. There is no avatar-like. Nor in Islam. In Christianity, it happened once with Jesus, but that's a dead access point. Now it's the church which represents the body of Christ. So there's no human being present today where you can say, this is my access point. So this is programmed deep down as something that is sort of, there's some suspicious thing, something sinister, maybe some quackery, and so on and so forth. And I found that philosophically, the idea of Satchitanand as the nature of the self is incompatible with the Abrahamic religions. Because if, like in Christianity, everybody's essence is you're born sinner. You're born sinner. And hence that's the statement of the problem. And then there is, they say, we now know how to cure your disease. That's their paradigm. They're within that paradigm. So I have a whole lot of, every year these missionaries come around my house in Princeton. When they're trained, before they go to places like India, they tell them to go to the neighborhood and practice, So and so I can tell, doorbell rings, very nicely dressed guy, young 2-3 men, women, they come and they ask questions like, can we please come in? And I know who they are, but I pretend like I'm this dumb guy I don't know. So I bring them in, offer them tea. And then they want to do small talk like, oh, this is nice painting. Oh, you are from where? This, like that, small talk. I know that they're trained that you first make the client comfortable. So after a certain amount of that, one of them says, sir, can I ask you a personal question? So I know exactly what they're going to say. I say, sure. And they say, have you been saved? And I say, I was never condemned to begin with. And then I pretend like I don't know what this is, saved from what, like that. Some of them ask, "Sir, have you heard the good news?" So I say, "Did the stock market go up? Or what is this? Good news? What good news? Oh, we have then they tell me Jesus has come to save and so on." So I kind of pretend like I, don't know what they're talking about because I can't even relate to it. And then I start, they tell me this Christianity, this original sin, and, everybody's born sinner and so on. Then I decide that, okay, I got to turn it around a little bit. So then I ask them, have you heard the Hindu good news? And they say, "Oh, Hindu good news." See, this is not what they've been trained in their catalog, in their course. They've been taught what the guy will say and what to answer, but they haven't expected anybody to say like this. So they are dumbfounded. Say, "Hindu good news. What is that?" So I say, Hindu good news is that there is no original sin. We are all originally divine. And then I can discuss that, look, from my point of view, from our tradition, you are divine. You haven't done anything wrong. Why are you sinner? You look like a nice guy. You look like a fine guy. Or everybody's like that. So they get very thrown off. Then some of them bring some senior guy next time. So I have a lot of fun with this, I have a lot of fun. So the discussion on what are the strengths and all that is a huge topic we can go on, and I'd like to come and spend more time here because you're just perfect group of people for me to interact with and spend more time with because you're meditative. See, I'll tell you in our tradition there are many paths for different kind of psychological mindsets. The path of bhakti is very important. Don't trivialize it. It's a very important path. Very important path. I do bhakti. It's very important. But it turns out that nowadays, somehow, it's also become sort of mechanical. So many people have done surveys in US temples to find out why they come here. They come to do a transaction with God. So it's like $108 you get this done, $1,001 you this one. So I want my daughter married, so there is this deal or price for this procedure. So that's kind of a different bhakti than the bhakti for transcendence, the bhakti for unity consciousness, the bhakti for elevating your consciousness. But if you look at bhakti in the real sense, it's a profound path. However, I find that when I'm giving talks, the places where they tend to be mainly bhakti oriented, not meditation oriented and not philosophy oriented, usually won't get it as quickly. So I usually it's sort of like their mindset is very different. I like the Gyan Yoga and the meditation type people, the people who really have a serious sadhana, because they are following the same path I am following. My path is not only the dhyan and the gyan, but also the bhakti, also the tantra, also the karma, all of that. And even karma is a kind of bhakti only, because you are doing, it's flowing through you, and it's also not that this is someone else. So that cultivation takes a while, but it becomes more and more natural. So I particularly like organizations like this and satsangs like this because I feel I relate to the kind of wavelength that people are in. Now, there are also weaknesses and issues. I mean, I could just go on. I have so much written notes here on the positive sides, but we also have some issues. One of the things we have to concern is that the individualism in the path, because you're going inward. Since you're going inward, it is my antakaran is mine, and I don't have access to yours, you don't have access to mine. So it is a sort of a very individual, personal pursuit. I'm getting more and more comfortable and familiar with my own inner being. So there is also a tendency to be withdrawn, world negating, not interested in helping people, no rasa, no leela. There's a tendency like that. And my guru used to warn people. My guru used to say, like in Ayurveda, you first go through fasting, not to starve to death, but to cleanse out the toxins, but then you come back and eat properly. Similarly, the stage of withdrawal from action, nivritti, is a kind of a stage you go through in order to detox your actions. So when you have done the detox your actions, some people who are sannyasis go to a cave, it's fine, I respect them a lot. But people who are in vyavhar, in worldly life, must re-engage from a different level. Reach a different level and re-engage, which is what you're also doing. You have so many wonderful projects that you're doing. But I find that there is a weakness and a tendency in the half-baked jnani, who sort of done some reading, parroted a lot of words, and they can keep chanting some shlokas that nothing matters, we can abandon everything. So this kind of an attitude leads to a sense of social irresponsibility. If not bad actions, at least not taking charge of, taking ownership of social issues, cleaning things up, helping others, helping poor people, helping disease, helping political, social problems. Now, if you see our texts, they're very world-affirming. If you see Mahabharata, or Ramayana, or any of our texts, they're very, very world-affirming. And you see our traditional temples were like today's NGOs providing social service. It is true. They would provide a huge amount of social service. They would look after people who are suffering, and sort of they were centers of learning, not just bhakti, but also a whole lot of other things. So we've kind of over the centuries lost that, and today it's become a very withdrawn tendency among a lot of people, and some use it for escape. Because certainly in their personal life, in their personal business, they are very clever. They'll negotiate the best deal, and they're not going to, Indians are very shrewd negotiators. And when it's their own personal thing, I mean, the same guy who tells me, oh no, this is all maya, it's all mithya, who cares, doesn't matter. When you ask him to get involved, they give you that kind of reason. And you tell him that he's a doctor, he's chasing all the insurance reimbursement. Why is he not saying this mithya and maya? And when he's negotiating price of something, why is he bothered? He should say, well, how does it matter if there's one shunya or two shunyas at the end? It should be. The point is that when it's selfishness, they're really into it. But when it's something personal, they're really into it. But when it's for the bigger cause, they can always misquote some texts and claim that none of this is necessary. I also feel that somewhere along the way, the caste problem became bad. And it is not linked with Hinduism, because I've read this a lot, I've studied this a lot. The jati tradition was not like today's caste system. And the varna jati were two-dimensional matrix, which got collapsed in the recent few centuries. And there are reasons for that. There are historical circumstances which led to that, which, I've conducted a few workshops on the origin of that. But whatever the cause may have been, the history may have been, the point is we are having a problem and we ought to solve it. Good news is that organizations like AOL and most of the new Renaissance revival type organizations are beyond these kind of boundaries and very good about making that as a philosophical statement of theirs. But still a lot more people are not so awakened about these social issues as you people are. Because particularly when you go around the hinterlands, you do see that. So I think changing these problems within our own society is a very important thing for us to do. The Indian mind is deeply colonized. We got political freedom, but not intellectual. In fact, it's not just the language, I'm using English now, but more than that, we are changing the framework, the way of thinking, the paradigms, the nature of time, the nature of aesthetics, the nature of the language itself. Some certain Sanskrit words which should never be translated, we are translating. In my book, Being Different, I have a whole chapter on Sanskrit non-translatables, where I've given a sample of about 20 or 25 words in Sanskrit, and I'm arguing how the common English equivalent is wrong. It's a distortion. Like Atman cannot be soul. It is commonly translated as such. because soul, the history of soul and the background of soul, the whole philosophy of soul, soul doesn't reincarnate. It is eternally damned through original sin in some traditions. So the meanings of these words is controlled by the metaphysics of certain traditions. Animals don't have a soul. They don't have a soul. Plants don't. In our tradition, they have Atman. So the whole, and then the idea of Aham Brahmasmi, and the idea of unity consciousness of Atman is not the same in soul relationship to God and soul relationship to world. So when you really look at the metaphysics and the cosmology of soul, it is not the same as Atman. And the problem when you translate is that a young child thinks that since you replace the word with the word soul, then you're talking about the same philosophy, the same idea. He doesn't need to study it. He can just understand whatever the other guys are saying must be what we are saying. So this leads to digestion because all the philosophical distinctiveness, uniqueness gets lost because certain very, very powerful Sanskrit words which are non-translatable get lost. And so I'm... in this book, I just illustrated some non-translatables, but there's quite a few of them that don't have an exact English equivalent because that philosophical concept and that experience was never there. Even something like Shraddha, there's no word like that. There's no word like Shraddha. Even yoga, you can't say it's exercise, you can't say it's prayer, you can't say it's gymnastics. What is it? I mean, the whole process of what you're trying to achieve does not fit into that philosophy, so they don't have a word for it. You see, so that's a serious problem I have, that we have become colonized in our entire idiom, in our way of life, and this is very serious. So I'm beginning to conduct a whole lot of these decolonizing workshops. I conducted some workshops in the US, 1 day, 2 day type on decolonizing. What can the average person do? So now I'm getting a little more courageous and going to, like when I go back to Delhi, I have a workshop in JNU, Jawaharlal Nehru University, which is, which is a center of very extreme left kind of people. And it's a 3-hour workshop, round table, and we've invited discussants. I always like opponents, I love debate, so we've invited people from all these other departments to debate and argue. And I'm going to talk about decolonizing JNU. See, you need to keep on taking this to further levels. I also talk about decolonizing modern Hinduism, because I find that a lot of the Sanskrit words being digested into English equivalents is a problem for me. And I'm finding that a lot of modern movements have, in order to become easier to understand and reduce the difference between themselves and the clientele, especially westernized people, they made these compromises. But I think our tradition is so strong. It's like Indian cuisine. You know, there are these people in the US who have started these fusion restaurants, but they don't do as well as the one who supplies real, authentic Indian food. Whether it's South Indian food, North Indian food, there is Rajasthani food, there is Hyderabadi food, because people like the authentic. If it is some half-baked thing, then why would they need it from us? They can already get all those things. So I feel that in fact, the more rigor, the more demanding you make your teachings. In fact, the bigger the success, because people realize that you see what happened in the 60s and 70s, the gurus went and many of them supplied digestible material. It was new age, it was big fashion at the time. All that got digested. Those people rejected now, those gurus, paramparas now disappeared. J. Krishnamurti you never hear. You don't hear, all the major gurus who went. You see who the 5 or 6 major gurus were. Osho, in the West I'm talking about, okay? They're all gone because their stuff got diluted, digested, appropriated, westernized, Christianized, whatever. So I think the market, even if you want to think about it from that point of view, practical point of view, is for very deep, authentic experience, which is very demanding, which takes effort, where you really have to change a lot of your life. People really want that. People are looking for that. There's a large thirst for that. So I feel that we should have such confidence that we are not going to try to be same as you. You are welcome to be same as us. So. Also, I feel that we keep hearing that the population dividend is great for India because we have a youth population and we are producing more babies than anyone else. So, we are really doing well because we have so many consumers and whatnot. But the same person who's a consumer and will help the economy as a consumer also has a stomach, has to be fed. And I think this population bomb is going to come and haunt us because we have depleted the water supply. There is no more land left that we can expand into. The natural resources, whether it's oil or whatever other natural resources, are finite and depleting. There's more and more competition for shrinking these resources. So it'll become more difficult to sustain bigger and bigger population. And also with automation, the idea that a lot of workers are there, they can take on jobs, is short-lived because like for instance call centers, we started the call center business in India, and Bangalore is a big hub of that, but you would probably know that Philippines has more call center market than India does, because if you are basically doing labor arbitrage, that we can sell you for a fraction of the other guy's cost in their country, then first of all you have to keep your people poor in wages, otherwise that differential will go away. So the business model requires keeping wages a big differential. And also this model, once it's perfected, those guys are smart, they'll go to all these other countries. If Pakistan had peace and were not a hideous place to do business, they have a huge English speaking population, they could go and really do this English call center stuff very easily, I would say. So this business of large population can become a huge liability in many ways. So I feel, and I don't think anybody wants to mention or talk about things that are politically incorrect and unpopular. So no politician, no party even raises this issue. But these are issues that we have to deal with ourselves. I could, what time is it? And because I want to do Q&A. How much time? Oh. 7:20. And what time do we have to finish? Because I can go on till tomorrow morning if I... Huh? Till 8. But Q&A. 7:30. Okay, so I'll say a little more and then I do want to do Q&A. So I feel that certain projects that I'm working on, one is Take Back Yoga, as by connecting it to the philosophy, and the philosophy has to be non-digestible, has to have some non-digestible thing in it, which I call poison pill. Poison pill is how many of you know from a business, if you have a business background, how many of you know what poison pill is? Okay, so okay, good. So poison pill is a business term. If you buy a company, do a hostile takeover, the company does not want to be sold, but it's on the stock market and you bid and you buy them out. There are certain legal devices that they have such that upon takeover, something happens to the company automatically, it's tripped over, such that it blows up in the sense that it no longer makes sense for you to be the owner. So it backfires. And so there's a deterrent. Anyone trying to take over such a company looks for poison pills and then they will avoid it. I used to work in a company which some big shots, it was a multinational, some big shots wanted to take over. There was a threat, so our chairman called and brought in a poison pill. And then these guys ran away. So that's where I got the term from. But the term I'm using it in a different sense. I'm using it as a deterrent. Like a porcupine, doesn't go and attack, but it opens its quills, and if you eat it, you will harm your digestive tract. So it has in other words, it's an attitude which says, I'm not harming you, but if you try to digest me, you'll hurt yourself. That's the idea of poison pill. So I've been doing a lot of work, and I'm publishing more on this now, on how to link our very tasty, delicious items that people want to digest, how to reconnect them to things, anchor them, and make sure that they cannot be separated. They will not be legitimate. There will be a distortion if they are separated. Make sure that we anchor them, link them, couple them with things that, if taken, will completely contradict and violate the core premises. So, for instance, the idea of reincarnation. The principle of reincarnation cannot be accepted within the Abrahamic traditions, because the idea of one life, and then you go to heaven, hell. In one system, there's a certain kind of heaven. I had a tour of the Mormon temple in Salt Lake City. They gave me a tour, and because I asked a lot of interesting, detailed questions, they said this must be a very serious candidate. So they brought some senior guy to answer all my questions, and I asked them all these questions about what happens in heaven. Do you have good weather? Do you have golf? And they really take it seriously. Like, really, we can find it out and let you know, like that kind of thing. So different. You see, the idea of reincarnation is not easily acceptable in systems, because the whole framework, philosophical framework, and this problem of original sin, and you have to be saved within a finite amount of time, so the pressure is on you, you better get saved, otherwise you go to hell and forever, and there's no transfer. Although some religions say that you can transfer your dead relatives from wherever they are to heaven if you pay them some money. There is that kind of facility also available. So I've discovered for myself a range of non-digestibles, and then I use them as building blocks to link with other things to deter digestion. So this is a very interesting project, and a lot of people can get involved. You guys, people with your background, are very bright, and I've got a whole list of each one of those is a very big topic by itself. So we can discuss that in Q&A or later on if you want. I'll switch to a different topic because I only focus on one aspect. I feel that India, let's talk about India. If seva of Dharma is my passion and my calling, then just like the human, this Jivatma needs a body to live in, so this Dharma needs a nation, needs a body. And so I feel that India needs a positive narrative. India needs a unified narrative, because it is the keeper of the Dharma, and it's a very important relationship. So while my goal is the Dharma, the idea of protecting the interests of India is like a means to an end, not an end in itself. And even further removed is politics. I think the politics is only a vehicle to protecting Dharma and the nation. And to the extent political groups are helping, I would like to encourage that. To the extent they're not helping, I will not encourage that. But I'm not for a party for the sake of it. I have made it very clear. I'm not supporting someone because I just want to support them for the sake of it. I'm only supporting them to the extent that they're helping Dharma, and in ways that they're not helping Dharma, I'm very vocal and critical about it. So my feeling is that India, and I published a blog on first post yesterday, that there are two competing narratives of India. One is a unified civilization, and the other is fragments, clashing fragments. This caste group, that caste group, this minority, the people of this state, this language, this class structure, whatever. So we have these vote banks that are patronizing one particular group, one particular vote bank, one particular fragment, and these are in tension against the rest of the nation, in order for the vote bank to get popularity and get support. And my book, Breaking India, which came out in 2011, about 4 years ago now, gives a huge amount of data on how these fragments are now working with foreign nexuses. There's church, which has its fragments. There's Maoists somewhere, they have fragments here. There's people in Pakistan, they got their fragments. So there's all kind of foreign nexuses with their fragments in India, and these people are working together. And the book Breaking India says this is an intellectual breakup, a kind of identity breakup of India. And this is very dangerous because once people have a sense of history that I'm not Indian, or I shouldn't be Indian, or the rest of the Indians have harmed me, my ancestors were oppressed by them, we are being oppressed by them, then it doesn't take much to go from there into violence, into separatism and so on. So this business of, we have two competing narratives, the narrative of fragments and the narrative of nation. These are two competing narratives. And Congress party used to do a good job at one time of keeping all these fragments under itself and saying, we will look after all your interests. So Congress party used to do that one time. But over the past couple of decades, people started abandoning for various reasons, and little groups formed, various vote banks formed, and Congress kept shrinking. And now, I think the rise of AAP party in Delhi is a kind of a new gathering of these fragments. The fragments are reincarnated into a new body. It's like the Jivatman leaves, find a new body. I think, yeah. So what happened is the Congress body, became toxic because of the dynasty, which people didn't like, and corruption that the dynasty did and encouraged others to do, which people didn't like. But they were not able to expel the dynasty because the dynasty, it's their family business, they control it, so they cannot be thrown out. So what happened is, to continue in the same body became not viable, so these forces left and reconstituted themselves in a new body. So I wrote this article called, Is AAP the Reincarnation of Congress? Now, a lot of BJP supporters clapped. But now, you have to ask yourself the question, is BJP living up to the unified India nation narrative? Okay. It's a question. I didn't answer it. I didn't answer it. But within Q&A we'll talk. I'm really asking, maybe in 8 months is too early, maybe, but I would have thought at least there would be some thinkers, some think tanks, some smart people who are at least having conferences, raising these issues, having dialogues to talk about what should be our national narrative. I find a huge thirst of demand from me to do workshops on what's our national narrative all over, young people wanting it. But I don't see party leaders having any time for any of this saying narrative, wo kya hota hai? Yeah? Like, how do I get my votes in the next election? That is the narrative they want. Please tell me what I do about this guy, that guy, how to solve this, how to answer that question, how to do this. It's very short-term tactical. Now, maybe that's the nature of politics in India. Maybe the nature of politics in India is that you've got to survive. If you're not in power, then you have no chance of making any narrative. So first job is to create the power base, which means go win a lot of elections. And don't worry about the narrative. But I would have thought that some respect for the issue would have been given, which it hasn't. Or at least I have not known. And I go around Delhi 3-4 times a year. I meet all kind of people. And they all love to hear this concept philosophically as something from a sky level, But detail-wise, there is no craving or thirst, no priority that we got to create this national narrative in order to combat these fragment narratives. We have to create a narrative. It's not just enough to say the narrative is we'll have 9% GDP. Because that's not specific to this civilization. That's just a modernity, Western European modernity of the meaning of progress. It's not even necessarily our narrative, this kind of a thing. I do not see our values and our lifestyle and our non-translatable Sanskrit categories and our sadhana and what is unique and distinct about us being in the narrative of any government, any party, any of those parties. I don't see that. Nor is it clear to me how much sadhana the people really do. It is one thing to talk to get votes, but how much is really practiced and how, in that sense. So I will say we have one group of forces which are breaking India forces. That is clear. And they are well identified. Barack Obama who scolded India for human rights and religion and all that, was briefed and encouraged to do so by the US Commission on International Religious Freedom, USICRF, a group that I have studied for over a decade. I have written about them. I have critiqued their annual report on human rights of India every year. They write a report, I write a critique. And but Indian government should be doing that. When they write a human rights critique of China, within 1 or 2 weeks they give them a 200-page rejoinder, because they have their own thinkers. But we don't have our people doing that. So who is the caretaker of this? Our government didn't even anticipate that he will say something like this. It would have been clear, because every president is briefed by 4 or 5 vested interest special think tanks when he goes. So this is a predictable topic that every president will be briefed on. And it should not have come as a surprise. We should not have been dazed, oh, why did he do it, and all that. And in any case, we should have had a good, solid response, because in my book, Breaking India, which is 600 pages, gives you so much to respond on this kind of a matter. But the government didn't respond, our media are ignorant people, none of them knew how to respond. So we are lost on this type of matter. This tells me that the Breaking India forces are there. They are getting stronger. Whether they are reincarnated in body X or Y, they are there. Even if AAP loses, if AAP disappears, then somebody else will come and claim all these fragments. That doesn't mean that these fragments have disappeared. It just means that they lost their body, they'll be reincarnated some other way. So this half, or whatever the percentage is, the Breaking India segment of Indian society is vibrant, and there are people trying to capture them. The question I want to leave with you is, who is at a government level really managing the national narrative of unity? Who? Is it the religious people? Is it the political people? Who? Academics are themselves lost. Media people are just, many of them are just jokers. They're just not very smart. And so who's going to do this? This is troubling to me. Because I think BJP got an amazing chance. But I think it should not take it for granted. It has to start creating a positive narrative, counter discourse of its own in order to be able to survive these political onslaughts that are predictable. So I think I'll just stop here, and then we'll turn it over to some Q&A. Thank you so much.
That I came to know about you only about a week back, and because of you I missed my sadhana for last 2 days, because I've been watching your YouTube videos for about over midnight, and a lot of things I know you have in you that you want to share but you have not shared. So I have a few questions, and very shocking about Sanskrit missing by 1 vote, about Devdutt Patnaik, so many things I came to know. I have actually 2 questions. And
so can I say one thing before I forget? I want everybody's email IDs and yours, because I have a list I'll put you on for discussion purposes. We cannot take all the questions today, but the thing I want you to do is, if you give me your email ID, I'll put you in my discussion, and it's like a satsang, an online satsang. We have 5,000 members, and every day people are asking questions, and I'm giving answers, and others giving response. So it's on these very topics online. So please ask the question, but the other items you're doing, and is there a sign-up sheet going around? Mamta ji, is there a sign-up sheet? Okay, so the sign-up sheet is going around. You must sign up. All I need is your ID. I don't need phone number, address, or anything, just your email ID.
So my specific question is basically, you talk a lot about Abrahamic religion, especially about Christianity. Maybe it's because you're from US. Is it that the danger of Islam is less in India? We know the socialist and secular is itself a problem in India for whatever reasons. And similarly, where I actually struggle is with the Advaita versus Dvaita philosophy. Within Hinduism itself, which is probably, a bone of contention, especially this Advaita philosophy from Abrahamic religion to the Hinduism, the Sanatana Dharma. Thank you.
Sure, thank you very much. I think Islam is a very serious threat, and if you go to Delhi, the biggest digestion going on is into Sufism. There's a huge digestion into Sufism, very fashionable, and people are sort of lost and thinking it's same because the Sufi said this and the Sufi said that. So this person who hosts the Sufi festival in Delhi, he's a Nawab something from somewhere, and so I met him, and he was talking about how this is the real Islam. So I said, can you have the Sufi singing and the Sufi festival in the Jama Masjid? And he was stunned because it's banned, Sufi music is banned in the mosques. Okay, you can't do it in Kaaba, you can't do it in Saudi Arabia, you can't do it in the Jama Masjid. So I said, how can this be the real essence of Islam if the Islamic house of worship bans it? Or is it just an export variety for Hindus to be brought in? Okay. So these are important questions. I do spend a lot of time thinking about these. The second point was Advait, Vishishtadvait, Dvait are three major schools of Vedanta. Vedanta is not the only school of thought. There are other schools of thought. Okay. Now, philosophical differences is because I have had a certain enlightened experience, and in my enlightened experience, I have a way of explaining it, expressing it to you. You had your experience, and you have a different way of explaining it. Our tradition does not want to exclude or to, say that this is considered blasphemy or any of that. So people are allowed to teach their experiences, and it's like a free market. You can choose this thing or that thing, whatever you feel like. So I do not think, if you read my book, Indra's Net, The Philosophical Unity of Hinduism, there I show the unity based on certain very deep concepts which are shared by all of these. Whether you are of this or that kind, whether you're into bhakti only, whether you're tantra, whether you are into Kashmir Shaivism, you don't even have to be into Vedic tradition. I happen, but there are so many traditions that are not Vedic oriented. There are deep philosophical unifying concepts which I've explained there. I think our problem is not the diversity of views and paths. The problem is that we are not really understanding them properly. And there's also a short-term mentality on the part of a lot of the organizations and teachers. So I think as people learn more, we will circumvent this issue, because for a long time, we didn't have a problem. There's no war going on. There are people you could convert to another within Vedanta kind of tradition. What is different now is that these Abrahamic religions are based elsewhere. Their power structure is based in a foreign country. They're like MNCs, multinationals, with a branch office here, and they are calling the shots from somewhere else, sending the funds, getting training, appointing, a branch office manager here and there, and they have a political motive. Their history of expansion, both in the case of Christianity and Islam, it was not a tradition expanding separately from the king and the ruler, but combined. It was part of imperialism, conquest, expansion. That is how the religion expanded. So the very concept is linked with political hegemony and political oppression also. That is what we are facing now. So we need to understand them on our own terms. We need to understand them. The Indian term Purva Paksha means studying the other and understanding him honestly, fairly, understanding him in such an authentic way that he will be impressed that you really understand him. Purva Paksh is a very important requirement in our tradition. The people of one Vedanta would do Purva Paksh on the other. They would do Purva Paksh with the Buddhists and Mimamsa and whatnot. So they would do Purva Paksh with different philosophical systems within the Indian subcontinent. When the Christianity came and Islam came, we should have done Purva Paksh on them. And we should have then become very clear. So when you do Purva Paksh, you understand the other. It's like comparative analysis. That's what Purva Paksh is like. And then the response you give is called Uttar Paksh, which is your rejoinder. So our ashrams and temples and centers of learning should have centers of Purva Paksh of other faiths and Uttar Paksh. That is what I'm trying to do, but this I'm trying to get it installed in various establishments. That is the starting point of trying to protect ourselves.
Jai Gurudev, I'm breaking my silence. Sir, my question is, how do you see the effect of FDI on the conversion? Because in South Korea, 40% of the conversion happened after FDI. So how do you see that? What
FDI?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, you see, South Korea went through a very rapid conversion. You know, it's very interesting, and people think that we survived 5,000 years, this and that. We can't be so complacent. The sleeper cells of evangelists and various other kind of foreign excesses are very aggressive, and they've been buying a lot of land in India, training a lot of our people, and so they are expanding more than we think they are. I think FDI is a separate issue one has problems with on its own rights. I mean, even in terms of, are we selling out our assets? Are we selling out the capital? We are going to all become employees of some foreign companies. Then we might as well, it's like the East India Company used to own the business. We were just working for them. So Infosys is just an Indian shell, but it's a foreign majority owned, for example. A lot of companies are like that. So I think FDI is a separate issue from religious evangelism, because religious evangelism has its own dynamics in parallel. And I think the religious evangelism is a very serious threat to national integrity and national security. I certainly agree with that. Now, this gentleman said very nicely, he said, because I'm in silence, I'll write down my email ID, which is very good. But, you know, I need to be able to read it. It says ZITVU or W. I need to know. So maybe he can come and clarify later. Just write in block letters your email ID and just give it to me, or your card or whatever. I would love to have it and continue our dialogue further also. More questions?
So, why is it that in India, calling oneself a Hindu is akin to calling oneself a fascist?
Good.
Why is it that Hinduism is a bad word, and more so specifically in the so-called, what I term them as the pseudo-secularists?
Yeah, okay. Okay, that's a good question. Hinduism is a perfectly fine term. People get into this discussion that Hinduism is a new term, it was a Persian term or this term or that term. And my answer is as follows. It's a modern name for an ancient thing. The thing is what we're talking about, not how it's named. Whether you call it X, and X may have changed the name to Y, it's still the same entity. So Hinduism today is a name that represents very ancient philosophies, practices, meditations, yagnas, bhakti traditions. The substance and content of what we call Hinduism is very ancient. And this book, Indra's Net, is basically about that continuity. And so the name is irrelevant. The age of the name is irrelevant to the age of the entity. You could change your name tomorrow, but it doesn't mean you didn't exist. So we should fight it on that basis. We should not get into the argument of when the name started and all. We should say the substance of what it means, the practices and ideas that it contains are very ancient, and that's what we're talking about. So I think if you are clear yourself on the antiquity of Hinduism, what we now call Hinduism, you can defend it better. I would also say that this pseudo-secular group in India have picked on Hinduism, and they don't apply the same critiques and the same yardsticks to take on other religions. They don't do this, why are there no women's rights in Islam and whatnot. All kind of problems exist in various traditions. It's become fashionable because what happened is during the Soviet era, they did a very good job of infiltrating Indian educated elite into left-wing fashion. And when Mrs. Gandhi needed support from the communist parties for her coalition government, which they gave her, they did not ask for seats like we want to be railway minister and things like that. They wanted to be vice chancellors, appoint leftist vice chancellors of universities. They wanted left-wing people to be appointed in history departments, in political science departments, in English departments. They wanted to be in the history these things like CSDS and all these organizations that give grants for social sciences. They wanted to control the social sciences rather than get government ministries. It's very smart, because their idea was that if we get government ministries, we can make short-term bribes and all that. But if we get control of the intelligentsia machinery, then 10 years, 20 years from now, we'll have a whole nation of leftist people on our ideology. Look how it worked. So today, they are getting the fruits of the investment they made in getting into higher education. They got into higher education. So that is why so much pseudo-leftism is out there. But I thrive on debating these people. And you should help me organize these debates, and I'll come and debate them. Recently I had a debate in Houston with a major Christian theologian. It's on YouTube. If you go to my YouTube channel, you will find it. It's a very popular YouTube. A lot of people have watched this debate. I go on looking for people that I can debate who are intelligent, who are well informed, and we must do it on camera, and we must put it on YouTube. So I'm looking for leftists all the time in India to debate. Okay, there's one question here. What about casteism in Hinduism? Okay, so as I mentioned, casteism is a serious problem. It has been linked with Hinduism, but you'll find caste in Islam in India, you'll find caste in Christianity in India. They have separate graveyards in Christian churches in India. You have Ashraf and Ajlaf caste in Islam. Ashraf are the castes who claim to have Turkish or Arabic blood or those kind of things. Those are the Ashraf, and the Ajlaf are the people who are natives. So they have caste problems with them. So caste is a epidemic that has to be dealt with. Casteism, I'm saying, abusive caste is an epidemic which is not limited to a particular tradition. And you should not think of it as something that Hinduism sanctioned, because Hinduism have plenty of counterexamples. And Varna is not the same as caste. Varna is, Gita says that your Varna is determined by your karma. So it doesn't say it is determined by a parent's karma. Gita, I think it's 4.8 or 4.12 or something, it says that it's one of those, that your Varna is determined by your own karma. And so that is itself telling you, it is my own karma and not my parents' karma which determine my Varna. That's how it should be. One more. Yeah. Is that it?
So, yes.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Kindly give the paper, sir. So you can put the paper, sir. Kindly give.
Okay, so here's my very quick question. Sir, I have a secular friend who went to a yoga class, and he refused to say Om during the class because he did not want to be religious. And in order to humiliate the people in the class and the teacher, he actually said the reverse of it, which is Mo. And he had this argument with me. I believe that you cannot separate Om from yoga. But how do you actually have a sensible discussion about this with somebody like this who is, and where do you begin so you can make an impact
I'll tell you.
on the person?
Good. So in my book, Being Different, I take up this example of of yoga being digested, and I mention Swami Ramdev, who was kind enough not to take it personally. I mentioned Swami Ramdev when he first visited the United States. In an interview, somebody asked if a Muslim or a Christian wants to do yoga and he is not interested, he can't do Om, what should he do? And incorrectly, in my opinion, Swami Ramdev said he can replace it with Allah or Amen or something like that. Okay, and I explained there why that is not true. Because Om is a vibration. Om is not a meaning. It is not a concept. It is not God or something like some Abrahamic idea of God. It's a vibration. It's a vibration which has many levels. There is Vaikhari Vak, which is the external speech. Then there is Madhyam Vak, which is in your mind when you are speaking in your mind, when you're doing a mantra secretly, privately, just to yourself. That's Madhyam. Then there's Pasyanti, which is deep in your unconscious, when you fall into the gap, like Sri Siji teaches you. Yeah? You fall into the gap, there's Pasyanti. And then there's Para, which is the transcendence. So each mantra has all these levels. And it is not the religion idea like they're talking about. It is not it is a science. It is a science where a vibration has a certain effect. And Om has a certain effect, which almond has different effect. It's like if I eat one herb, one Ayurvedic medicine, it gives me some effect. If I eat a different one, it gives me different effect. It's not that one is better or the other is worse. It's just that each produces certain effect. So Om produces an Om effect. Some other thing you do produces a different effect. So if the prescribed method is Om for a certain effect that we have studied, our rishis have studied, this method will lead to certain conclusions. That is what we are teaching, and we are not denying that you may have some other medicine for something else. That is not even the issue. So this is not about denying some other religion. It is their narrow-mindedness, and it is our ignorance that we can't respond like this. It is our ignorance that we can't respond like this. And you know, the worst thing is when we succumb and say, okay, but why don't you start saying, Amen, and why don't you start saying Allah and whatnot, we just trivialize the whole thing. And I was so glad that Swami Ramdev didn't banish me or blacklist me, which shows he's a good guy, because a lot of others, when I talk like this, then they don't want to see me and all that. In fact, he invited me to the Astha channel. We had a 2-hour long discussion. It is on the YouTube. Wonderful, wonderful discussion we had. And he's very open about it. But now, he is very clear on the yoga is Hindu. He's very clear now. Yeah.
It's a great honor meeting you in flesh and blood. We have been following you on YouTube. Two very quick questions. Number one is, we keep traveling the world and we have these discussions with a lot of foreign friends from other religions. So if I have to give a quick 2-3 minute description of Hinduism, I know it's very difficult, but if I have to give a quick introduction, what would it be? And the second question, I'm part of RSS, I'm part of BJP, IT cell and all these. Every cell talks the same thing. And today in your speech you talked about, uniting them. So why don't you take an initiative and giving them some intellectual help?
So, 2 questions. Okay. So, and then they've told me to stop. So what I will do is I'll respond to these online. I'll show you the method to do that. But let me respond to his questions because they're very fresh. So the second one was why don't I help them? The second one is what is Hinduism in a nutshell. So if you go to indrasnetbook.com, indrasnetbook.com, it is, and also beingdifferentbook.com, both these books. Some excerpts are there, table of contents are there, overviews are there, a lot of these discussions are there. And this idea of how I explain Dharma in a clean way, in a simple way, as an open architecture. I call it an open architecture, which has many, many things inside it, but they have to conform to this open architecture. There are certain rules. You cannot be somebody who's trying to sabotage the architecture. Like in an internet, you can have lots of diversity. They are welcome, but they have to practice mutual respect. Otherwise, they're sabotaging, and then you have what do they call these antiviruses that will get rid of those guys. So Hinduism is like an open architecture web or network, which has always invited lots of different kinds of thinking. But in this description that you can read, I explain what is the common properties, what are the common qualities that these different things must have in order to be members of this very loose open architecture. And this keeps us flexible, it keeps us mobile, it allows us to change, and so on. Now the second, so please do read that. The second question is, why don't I do something to unite? The point is they have to invite me, I can't just sort of force myself in. And these organizations are very conscious about their boundaries, their leaders, and they don't want an outsider to come, maybe, Now, Sri Ji is so confident, he says, okay, Rajiv, come give a talk. Now, a lot of others are not like that. They're scared, they're threatened, they don't know what to do. Yeah. Because you see, you are smart enough, you are sufficiently grounded, you are sadhaks, and so you can figure things out, and you have a mind of your own, you can decide, and that makes you even stronger. And that is what a healthy organization would be like. But not every organization is like that, and it wouldn't be right for me to go and push myself in. And the political ones are even worse. They are so much turf conscious, very turf conscious. This is a serious problem we have. So that is That is where we are. What I want to say is this. Please leave your email ID. The following will happen. When I get back to the US, which is March 1, I'll have somebody type all this and we will put it. You will get an invite to Rajiv Malhotra discussion. You have to click and say yes. You have to. Otherwise you can't be in. If you are in it, then you are part of the daily satsang. These questions and many others like this across the spectrum we are addressing. And I want to close by thanking all of you for taking the time. And
Can everyone just wait for a second, please? Thank you.
okay, good.
We'll have to. Yes, sir. You can ask your question.
Yeah.
Why don't you give your questions over there? Kindly. And your books to sign, you can do them after.
Okay. What you can do is, my email is Rajiv Malhotra 2007 at gmail.com. That's RAJIV MALHOTRA, Rajiv Malhotra 2007 at gmail.com. So if you send me, I will have your email and I will put you into the email list and send you an invite and then you can accept it. I'll sit here.
Yeah. Can everyone please just be seated for a couple more minutes? Thank you. If you want your book signed or anything from Mr. Malhotra, you can approach him after. So just please be seated. I'd like to thank sir for that truly insightful and eye-opening talk he gave. But before we end, I'd like our trustee, Mr. Nikhil Sen, just to say a few words. Thank you.
Jai Gurudev. Rajiv ji, on behalf of the organization and especially Gurudev, I'd like to thank you for coming here. He would have loved to be with us, but he had some prior commitments. Your talk was truly inspiring and very insightful for all of us here. And I hope that we can have you with us again sometime soon.
Yes.
In the interim, I would request our chairman of VVKI, Commodore Rao, to felicitate you on behalf of Gurudev and the organization. This is a book that Gurudev wanted you to have. This is on connect. We spoke about today. He said the caste system in India is not something that you enter into. It's what you're born with. Everyone's the same, and then it's on your Dharma.
Evolve your
Yes.
from one nut to another one.
Thank you. Let's give Rajiv ji a big hand from all of us.